that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 451st edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom, unfortunately for me, and you might feel unfortunately for you too, is not here today. He's actually gone to Florida to visit relatives. I hope he's having quite a lot of fun there. He will be back, I hope, next week. Energy Week is a compilation of news items that I pick up during the course of my week doing my daily blog, geoharvey.com. You can find the articles that we're talking about here at geoharvey.com. Look them up and click on the calendar on the date that is mentioned for the article, and you can read the articles there, or lower on the screen that you're watching now, you should be able to find a text file that you can download, or a link that you can go to, which is the link to the WordPress site that Tom and I use for developing these shows. We're starting today on the 23rd of December with an item that comes from oh dear, computers. Comes from Balkan Green Energy News. Before I get into that, I should actually mention that we're getting into that time of year when we have to get money to support the show. BCTV used to have more income from the system that it was working in, and that got changed under the administration of Donald Trump. So it was necessary to earn money from outside, and each of the producers, each of the shows, has to fund itself to some extent. The actual amount that we have to fund the show with is very small when you consider the overall cost of putting together a show. BCTV has a really nice studio, at least I think it's nice. Having seen a couple of other TV studios, I would say yes, it's very nice, well equipped, but keeping equipment is not free. It's got a staff which is made up of people who are quite expert in what they do, and that's not free. And the cost of producing Energy Week is actually fairly high. We are supposed to come up with a small amount of the overall cost. And so I'm going to ask anybody who has a few dollars to spare and is willing to do so to go to BrattleBoroTV.org. It's a good way to do it. And at BrattleBoroTV.org, you can scroll down to the bottom of the screen and find a link that says support local television or something to that effect. I don't have the screen in front of me right now. I'll try to get it absolutely right before the next show, but poke around there and you can find a place where you can make a donation, which you can make by PayPal or by credit card. I'm told that BCTV actually prefers PayPal. The one important thing is that when you make a payment, you have an opportunity to give instructions, and the instructions should mention that you are supporting Energy Week. So let's start off the show with the item that I had mentioned at Balkan Green Energy News. This is a picture of a wind turbine. It's an Ørsted wind turbine, The title of the article is "World's Biggest Offshore Wind Farm Starts Producing Power." The Hornsea 2 wind power plant, located off the UK's east coast, has started delivering electricity to the mainland. When it is fully operational, the facility will have a capacity of 1.3 gigawatts. Together with Hornsea 1, currently the world's biggest offshore wind farm, the figure will be 2.5 gigawatts altogether. 1.3 gigawatts is a capacity that is just about double the capacity of the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant after it was uprated. And with capacity factors being what they are, an offshore wind farm should produce about half of the amount of electricity that it has as a capacity most of the time. And when you compare that to Vermont Yankee, which should produce about 90%, the percentage is what's called the capacity factor. And a nuclear power plant in the United States generally runs at a little more than 90%, which I find a little bit unnerving, because nobody else in the world seems to be getting that much out of them. And I wonder if American plants aren't pushing the idea of efficiency or producing as much as possible a little bit harder than they should. Nevertheless, you can figure that an offshore wind farm would be about half the capacity factor of a nuclear plant. So this wind farm is about the capacity of that nuclear plant just down the river. Our next item is, whoops, sorry, I'm having trouble with my mouse. There we go. Our next item is from, part of the problem is I've got two mice, which is, if you ever notice that Tom looks like a deer in the headlights, and he's actually said it exactly this way, it's because he's trying to do two things on the show, one of which is to follow the show, and the other of which is to control the screens. And I'm doing both of those right now. Not doing as well as Tom would. Anyway, this next item is from Renews. The title is European Energy Connects Danish PV to Grid. European Energy has grid connected a solar farm in northern Denmark, a 21.6 capacity plant that is at the northern tip of Jutland, near the town of Aalbæk in Frederikshavn municipality, and I'm pronouncing Danish really badly. The solar park has replaced crops that would ultimately end up in a biomass furnace as so-called sustainable biomass. And by the way, you can grow things under solar panels if the solar farm is set up for that. And in Vermont, one of the things that they like to do is keep sheep under the solar panels. That seems to work pretty well. But there are a lot of other things, and I'll get into that later. We should probably, I should mention this. Jutland, there are areas of Sweden that are farther south than this. There is no part of Vermont, by the way, which is as far north as the southernmost parts of Germany. Pardon me. And of course, all of Denmark is farther north than all of Germany. Sorry for the cough. And Jutland is the peninsula of Denmark, and this is at the farthest most tip of that, which means it's pretty far north. It's if you were to be this far north in North America and on the shore of Hudson Bay, you'd be pretty far up there. I don't think any part of James Bay is as far north as this. Anyway, we are getting up to Friday, Whoops, no, we're not getting up to Friday. We're getting up to an item from Renews. The title is Enel builds solar array at La Loma. Enel Green Power has completed construction of an apiary as part of a 187 megawatt DC solar project it is constructing in Colombia. Enel is aiming to promote the coexistence of bees, community, and clean energy in the same space, contributing to sustainable development. So far, 15 hives have been built. This is one of the easiest things you can do with agriculture under a solar array is to put beehives in. And those beehives will benefit farms as far out as the hives, as the bees can fly from the hives, which is about 3 miles. So 3 miles in every direction from the solar farm means that there's a lot of benefit to local agriculture and to wildlife, not at the farm, but nearby. This is something that is actually fairly important. But there are other things that you can do under those solar panels. As I said, those panels could have sheep grazing under them, but there will be more on this, and you can bet on that. I should get on to the next item. We're up to Friday, December 24th, and we have an item from Clean Technica. That is a traditional house in Sumba, which is part of Indonesia. This is from Clean Technica. The title of the article is Power Wells for Remote Villages in Indonesia. Substation 33, it's the name of an organization, is the training arm for YFF and a non-profit to address the reliance of people in isolated villages who rely on kerosene and have difficulty finding electric power to power their cell phones. Substation 33 developed what it calls the Power Well, a solar cell and a battery built into a bucket. Now they're installing power wells in Indonesia. This is a huge benefit to people who, have to breathe fumes from kerosene if they're going to study at night or whatever. People all over the world have become dependent to some extent for communication with people who are farther away on cell phones. So this is a huge benefit that is not very expensive, and people can rent these power wells and pay a very small amount of money for electricity. It's an electric upgrade that can be very important to them. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica also. The title is New Zealand Gets Its First Big Battery. I will describe what you're seeing in just a moment. On a freezing cold night in New Zealand, fossil fuel generators could not crank up fast enough and the grid failed. The event inspired a move toward big batteries. Meridian will build the first of these on the southernmost part of the Northern Island to support both the North and South Island grids. Now, what you're seeing there is an oil refinery. At least that's what I have read. I have no reason to doubt it. The battery is going to be installed at that site, and a cable that connects the two big islands will be able to carry electric power to and from that battery in connection with both the North Island and the South Island. These islands are very big, hundreds of miles long, and South Island is the less densely populated of the two. And actually, I think it's a little bit bigger than North Island, but this will give them a more reliable grid system than the one that they had, which actually failed. So that point is said to be the southernmost point of North Island in New Zealand. So our next item comes from Eurasia Review, and it has a picture of wind turbines. The title is Renewables became second most prevalent electricity source in 2020. And this is based on analysis. In 2020, renewable energy sources, which includes wind, hydropower, solar, biomass, and geothermal energy, generated a record 834 billion kilowatt hours of electricity, or about 21% of all the electricity generated in the United States. Now, what this refers to is obviously the United States, not worldwide. That amount was only exceeded by natural gas at 1,617 billion kilowatt hours. So the amount produced by renewables was a little bit more than half of the amount produced by natural gas. Natural gas produced more. This means that renewables are producing more electricity from those sources that I mentioned than nuclear, and they are producing more electricity than coal. And I think at this point, coal is probably in that scheme of things where natural gas is first, renewables in general second. I believe that nuclear is probably third and coal fourth. Renewables are increasing. Coal has been decreasing of late. We'll see a couple of additions to the output of coal in the next few years, but I don't think we're going to see, I don't think that it will bring the amount of electricity generated by nuclear up. We're not seeing additions of any amount that's appreciable to coal, and coal is still in decline. So that's just the way it is, I guess. We should move on. We are up to Saturday, December 25th. And by the way, on December 25th at 4 o'clock in the morning, I was working on the website, geoharvey.com. I do it every day. I don't take days off. And in fact, I haven't had a day off since the blog started, which was the 2nd of June, 2012. And before that, I had done the same thing, but sent out the results by email going back to the middle of the middle of April, 2011. So I haven't had a day off in 10 years. That is okay. I enjoy doing this. Our next item is from Renews. This is a Haliade X wind turbine, which is a GE wind turbine. The title of the article is Mitsubishi-led groups to build 1.7 gigawatt of offshore wind in Japan. The Japanese authorities have selected 3 offshore wind farms totaling over 1,760 megawatts in Japan's first auctions for a fixed bottom project. So these wind turbines are going to be built on masts that are anchored at the bottom of the sea as opposed to floating masts. A little bit unusual. I wouldn't think that it would be easy for the Japanese to come up with that much power. They don't have a continental shelf the way we do in the eastern United States that allows them to put turbines very far from land. And I'm expecting to see wind turbines floating. But anyway, Mitsubishi Corporation is involved in all of the projects. The turbine manufacturer is GE, which will supply 139 of its 12.6 megawatt turbines for the project. So we're going to be seeing in the next few years quite a lot of offshore wind power added to Japan. And by the way, these wind projects, even offshore wind projects, go up very fast compared to construction of nuclear power plants, which generally take quite a long time. I was interested to see a large plant off the coast of Wales in which they were putting in one of these big turbines. It was not as big as these things by any stretch of the imagination. It was they were probably a fifth of the size of these turbines, but they were going up at a rate of 1 a day. So actually a little bit faster than 1 a day. It's kind of impressive to watch how they can work. So I'm not sure, based on the notes that I've got, when these projects will come to fruition, but they are being worked on. Okay, the next item I have is from CNN, and it is this is a picture of a red-tailed hawk. You can see his red tail. He's sitting on a flagpole. This particular flagpole actually happens to be in Washington, D.C., I believe, but nevertheless, the story refers to New Yorkers. And the title is "New Yorkers and Wildlife Are Finding Solace in the City's Parks." New York City's wildlife is thriving, and that's thanks to devoted scientists and activists who spent decades bolstering wildlife habitats in the city's 5 boroughs. New York is one of the most densely populated metropolitan areas in this country, but fully 14% of the city is parks. And in the article, they talk about the various wildlife that is found in New York City. And it is kind of a surprise to find, there are skunks who live in New York City, and in fact, there are coyotes who live in New York City. Not only that, there are coyotes that live in Central Park, and their area that they stay in during times when they're sleeping and so forth is are wooded areas of Central Park. But apparently there are wooded areas of Central Park where they can go. And this is something that is, well, it's a surprise to me. Not terribly surprising. I've come across stories about coyotes in Central Park before, but apparently this is, when I heard about them before, the story was involved speculation as to how the coyote got there. And in this story, they're living there. They're breeding there. They're raising their young there, and so there are coyotes who are just New Yorkers, and I imagine they're pretty comfortable with the presence of human beings. That, by the way, reminds me of going up on the top of Mount Washington with my son. He got a hot dog, and he was just holding the hot dog in his hand, and a fox came up and took it out of his hand and walked off. The foxes up there are pretty comfortable with human beings. It's not a park, and they don't have the normal regulations that you would find in parks. People do get away with feeding the wildlife, and so they get fed. Anyway, we should probably go on to our next item. Tesla Model Y vehicles. This is also from Clean Technica. Clean Technica does a lot of articles about vehicles, which I don't mind because vehicles are a large source of carbon emissions. The title of the article is "Tesla Helped China Cut Carbon Emissions by 855,878 tons from January to November of 2021, I wonder how they know that exact figure. Somebody obviously counted the emissions that would have come out had they. No, that doesn't make any sense at all, does it? On Christmas Eve, Tesla China released its year-to-date new energy contribution report. According to GasGoo, the report noted that Tesla helped China reduce carbon emissions by 855,878 tons. By the way, this is spelled T-O-N-S, so not T-O-N-N-E-S, and so I'm assuming that these are 2,000 pound tons, but you know, you never can tell. People spell things wrong sometimes. During the first 11 months of the year, a lot of people don't know that there is much difference between a ton and what Tom and I occasionally call a tonny, which is a metric ton. Okay, we are up to Sunday, December 26th, and we have a picture here of a wildfire in Tasmania. This particular article comes from the Columbus Dispatch, and it is titled, "Earth Became a Less Hospitable Place in 2021. Much of the Earth got hotter in 2021, worldwide weather weirder, wildfires more devastating, and the atmosphere more problematic, and the soil was less fertile. In arid expanses, animal and plant life became more precarious, forests diminished, the oceans warmed and rose and got more acidic." It sounds like everything is going bad, and here we have, on top of everything else, a wildfire in Tasmania as the picture. I'm going to get away from this. Here we go. The world's biggest offshore wind farm starts producing power. And this is a oh, I'm sorry. My computer decided to return to the top of the draft that I've got in front of me. This is from Clean Technica. U.S. federal recommendations support monitoring for offshore wind. This is a picture of wind turbines with a transformer platform. That on the right of that platform, you can see a kind of a dark rectangle. That is what you're looking at. There is a helicopter landing platform. Offshore wind energy is rapidly growing in the United States. It is essential to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. But offshore wind is and must be environmentally sustainable. NOAA and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management have made some recommendations about how that can be done. And of course, what they're talking about is monitoring what's going on, taking care that the wind farms be sited properly. There have been wind farms that have been opposed by some pretty responsible environmentalists. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, one summer years ago, closed down operations on the project operations on a couple of wind farms off the coast of the UK because they were concerned about specific species of birds that might be harmed by the wind farms. They don't oppose wind farms that they regard as being sited properly. And in fact, when they wanted renewable energy for their own headquarters, they put in a 1/4 megawatt wind turbine for the headquarters. But they want to make sure that wind farms are sited properly. There's more concerns about that. There are concerns about not just birds, but ocean life. And so there are the NOAA and the what is this? Bureau of Ocean Energy Management have made their recommendations. The next item has a picture of the Australian outback. It's an interesting looking canyon. This is from Clean Technica. The title of the article is, "Can Australia supply the world with rare earth minerals?" Australian government, this is both national and state, are seeking new revenue streams as coal experts look like they're diminishing in the long term. Demand is increasing for rare earth elements as EVs take over the highways. And by the way, it doesn't say it here, but also as wind turbines are being built. And Australia has a lot to offer, but the resources have to be developed. Rare earth elements, by the way, are not rare. They're actually all over the place. The big problem with rare earth elements is that they are so alike chemically that it's really hard to separate them. And they are found typically mixed together. So you get an ore for gadolinium and it's likely to have neodymium mixed with it, or, there's about a dozen of these rare earth elements. I used to work with gadolinium, and it's something that I know a little bit about. I've probably still got traceable amounts of gadolinium in my lungs from the gadolinium oxide that I used to make by the ton. Nevertheless, it is they're not dangerous particularly. They're very interesting, but they have properties that are really important for a whole variety of applications. And the Australians, as coal diminishes, want to build up their ability to deal with that. We are up to Monday, December 27th, and we have a picture of rooftop solar systems in Hawaii. This is from Clean Technica. Wind and solar provided 14% of US electricity generation in October. In October 2019, solar and wind accounted together for 11.3% of US electricity generation. For October 2020, they accounted for 12.4%. And just a couple of months ago, in October 2021, they accounted for 14%. And that is growth, and that will probably continue. And in fact, they're growing far faster than anything else is. The only other thing that's really been growing is natural gas. And I don't think natural gas will continue to grow. Maybe in 2021, maybe in 2022, but I'm seeing big reductions in the amount of natural gas plants that are actually being developed. So I'm kind of expecting that as a percentage of our overall supply of electricity, natural gas, I'm thinking will probably start to decline soon, and wind and solar will be really being developed fast. The next item is from the BBC, and it talks about snowstorms in California and other Western states. The title is U.S. Snowstorms. California and other Western states are battered. Heavy snows have battered the western regions of the United States, leaving thousands of people without power. Almost 30 inches of snow fell in parts of Northern California in 24 hours. Imagine that, 30 inches in 24 hours, causing blackouts, road closures, including one 70-mile-long stretch of Interstate 80 into Nevada. And we will talk more about this shortly. But the snow started coming down. Remember, this is an area that has been subject to drought, and they have had winters with very little snow. So this is considered a good thing. And the area where 30 inches of snow fell was a place where people very often build basically tunnels made of plywood going over their walks from their doors to the roads so they can get in and out without having to shovel the walk during the winter. Places where the snow in the winter can actually get up to the roof of a house. And again, we will see that shortly. The next item that we have is from Mercom, India, and it is titled, Australia announces $100 million funding for grid-scale battery storage projects. The Australian Renewable Energy Agency announced a $100 million competitive funding round for grid-scale batteries with advanced inverters to support the grid. The funding program will provide for energy storage systems of 70 megawatts or larger. 10 years ago, there was no such thing as a 70 megawatt storage system, but they're going up all over the world now. And people want these storage systems. The fact is that storing electricity in a battery and then letting it out on the grid produces electricity that is cheaper for the grid to, you know, on the spot market. It's cheaper than electricity from load following natural gas plants in many cases. And so that's one of the reasons why we really have not been building load following natural gas plants in the United States for the last couple of years. So we should continue going on, and I have just jumped backwards in my file again, so it'll take a minute, not a minute, but a few seconds for me to catch up. I'm getting there. Here we go. Okay. Our next photograph is from Luderitz in Namibia, and you can guess, possibly from the name, that Namibia was once a German colony. We're up to Tuesday, December 28th, and we have an item from the BBC which says, the African nation aiming to be a hydrogen superpower. I was blown away when I read this. I thought, this cannot be correct, but apparently it is. Luderitz is a town in southern Namibia. It has seen boom times based on diamonds and on fishing. Now, a green hydrogen project has been proposed to be, quote, the third revolution of Luderitz, end quote. The project could ultimately produce about 300,000 metric tons of green hydrogen per year. And that's the part that kind of blew me away. I couldn't understand how that could possibly be. How in the world would they be able to be produced? Well, Namibia is a country with a lot of sunshine. They're going to be doing this, I believe, probably with solar power. I think they have pretty strong wind power in that area too. And what they're talking about doing is making green hydrogen and then shipping it, which is something that would probably be beneficial for their local economy. It's just hard to believe that they would actually make that much of it. Okay, our next item, what we're looking at here is a robotic weeding system. That thing in the middle of the screen is a robotic system. If you look straight up above it, at the top of the screen, you can see the feet and the arm of a person who I believe was probably controlling it to some extent, but somebody who happened to be there. The article is from Clean Technica, and it's called Autonomous Robot Killing Weeds is More Eco-Friendly Than Herbicides. A German consortium is developing AMU Bot, a robot that will solve the problem of weeding without manual work or spraying with herbicides. Actually, the original article, I changed that word from pesticides to herbicides because they're talking about herbicides. And I think the author was, I don't know if the author was being lazy or had the wrong word, but they're killing weeds, and that means herbicides. Funding is from the German Federal Office of Agriculture and Food. The Fraunhofer Institute is coordinating the project. And I do think that it's a very nice thing that they've got a system that will not depend on herbicides. We as human beings do not need to be consuming herbicides. The pesticides and the herbicides and the fungicides and the other things that go onto plants in our agricultural systems are really kind of frightening. And when you consider corn, there's so much going on in these GMO cornfields that the reason they're GMO is because they want they want to be able to put huge amounts of various chemicals on the fields without affecting the corn. Well, the problem is the fields get so thoroughly covered with chemicals that any water that runs off of them is going to be toxic, and we have the water killing fish and things like that. And this is a big step in the right direction, I believe. Anyway, the next picture we have is a solar array. That's a huge solar array. Each one of those things there, that's not a solar cell, that's a solar panel. And just look at that array and compare it with the size of the train. I know it looks like something that isn't all that big, but it is huge. This is from Clean Technica. Railroads and solar power. You ain't seen nothing yet. Renewable energy has been quietly sweeping into the U.S. railroad industry, but the pace has been achingly slow. Things could pick up after if a new solar project, a new solar power research project in Germany pans out. It aims to leverage the built environment of railroads for direct electrification. We had a story that we talked about on this show, I'm going to say about 4 or 5 years ago, in which somebody at the Imperial College in London some group of people had figured out that the land and buildings of the UK's rail system could provide enough space for solar power that would power the entire rail transportation system all the time. And that I think is a really interesting approach. Anyway, here we have a system that is not just being talked about, but is actually being tested out in Germany. So we should probably go on. We're up to Wednesday, December 29th, and we have a picture here of a Zaporizhia nuclear plant. I'm sorry, I'm destroying the Ukrainian language there. This particular nuclear plant has 6 nuclear reactors, and it is the biggest nuclear plant in Europe. This is article is from Forbes. The title of the article is a Ukraine invasion could go nuclear. 15 reactors could be in a war zone. Now, let me read the synopsis. As Russia's buildup of on the Ukrainian border continues, few observers note that an invasion of the Ukraine would put nuclear reactors on the front lines of a military conflict. But in a full-scale, all-holds-barred conventional warfare, it could spark a catastrophic reactor failure. And that's not a joke. And on top of everything else, if you look at what that failure would mean, it's really kind of a restraint on Russia, because if these nuclear reactors melted down, the biggest problem would be in Russia. Nevertheless, this has the potential to be a serious problem. And if you look at what's going on, with Russia, Vladimir Putin, they built up military strength on the border of the Ukraine. It looks like they might want to invade. Putin is talking as though he would invade. He's told President Biden that if there is that there should not be increased provisions in the United States aimed at preventing Russia or whatnot from invading. But what's going to happen here if there's what is happening, what is behind this, I believe, is that Russia is in need of foreign currency. Every country on earth is in need to some extent of foreign currency, as far as I know. But Russia in particular is in need of foreign currency. They have to sell things to people in other parts of the world in order to provide for their economy. And 60% of what they sell is fossil fuels. They are as dependent on fossil fuels as the countries that we think of as being dependent on fossil fuels, countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so forth. But Russia is not, it's not formally part of OPEC. It is a country that is in the group that they call OPEC plus. It benefits from high prices of oil, and Putin has been trying to use the natural gas and oil that he sells to Europe as a kind of a diplomatic tool. So he has been withholding a certain amount of natural gas this year. He's been selling them the amount that he is obliged to sell them. He has not been selling them the amount extra that their economies are looking for. And he has been making suggestions that they are too reliant on renewable energy and should rely instead on Russia. A natural gas power pipeline that was supposed to be put in under the Baltic Sea was nixed by Andrea Merkel for the time being. And what Putin wants is to have the future of Russia, I believe, based to some extent on the systems that he has that bring in the revenues that he's getting now. 60% of Russia's revenues come from fossil fuels, and as you know, he knows we're trying to shut down the use of fossil fuels as fast as we possibly can. This is scary to him. I think we should bear in mind the reason why he is being warlike, the reason why he's acting like a bully, is not because he's strong. It's exactly the opposite. It is because he is weak and has some sort of fear about the future. In this particular case, if he gets involved in a war in the Ukraine, it could go very badly for Russia, really badly. My hope is that it won't be a war in the Ukraine, but you know, these are things that we just have to deal with. Okay, the next item is also from Clean Technica. We have a Hyundai 7. Reports claim Hyundai has halted internal combustion development. There is no confirmation from Hyundai yet, but Korean Economic Daily and Business Korea both report that Hyundai Motor Group has closed its internal combustion engine development office and shifted all of its attention to developing powertrains for electric cars. So this is the first company that I have heard of that had been building what we call gas mobiles, cars that burn gasoline or cars that burn diesel. This is the first one that I know of that is has apparently dropped its plans to to pursue further development. They're apparently not even developing hybrid cars. They're seeing that the cost of these cars, the fully electric cars, is going down very, very fast. And that means that at some point, and it's already happening, in fact, the cost of electricity, of electric powered cars, fully electric powered cars, will drop below the cost of gasoline powered cars. I think this is inevitable. The cost of batteries is declining at a very remarkable rate. My recollection is that it's 23% per year. And if that's correct, then gasoline powered cars are going to be something that you will buy at an extra price. You're going to have to spend a premium to buy a gasoline powered car. And an electric powered car in some cases might have a range of 300 or 400 miles. And you know, the speed at which they can be charged is very high compared to what it was only a few years ago. So there's a change that is developing, and that change is important. Okay, our last item for today. Here we have deep snow, and the last item is from CNN. I told you we were going to get back to snow. This picture, by the way, is not California. It's a picture of Colorado, but nevertheless, it is a picture of deep snow. The title of the article is "Nearly 17 feet of snow in California's Sierra Nevada is crushing records." It's still not enough. That is the title. As of Tuesday, that is last Tuesday, today being Thursday, so today is the 31st. That means it would have been the 29th of December. More than 202 inches of snow, which is pretty close to 17 feet. That is nearly 17 feet, or 5.2 meters, had fallen so far this month at the UC Berkeley Central Sierra Snow Laboratory at Donner Pass. It's enough to break records, but it's not enough to end the drought. That kind of tells you that the drought has been pretty bad. And it could continue to be bad, because this amount of snow that we're talking about is not enough to end the drought. It's enough to put a little water into the reservoirs and into the water table and so forth, but not to bring things back to normal. Nevertheless, on the short term, we have no reason to believe that we are not going to have droughty conditions for the rest of the winter. So we're just going to have to, I don't know, there's nothing that is going to be really good about this. We had a drought several years ago, and the drought ended with atmospheric rivers that were just pouring water into California. And reservoirs that were nearly dry were suddenly overflowing, with some trepidation that they were going to overflow into badly enough that dams would break and things like that, which would mean that cities like Sacramento was one of the cities they were afraid could end up being flooded. And it didn't happen, but that kind of swing between really bad drought and then flooding, and then back to really bad drought, that's something that has been going on. The flooding is not enough, and flooding will happen when this deep snow melts. The deep snow is going to cause the deep snow is going to melt in the spring, and it will mean that there will be a lot of water coming down those rivers, but it isn't enough to end the drought. If the atmospheric rivers continue, if the snow continues, then maybe it'll end the drought for a while. But the serious thing that's come about because of climate change is this huge swing of drought to flood, to drought to flood. And that is not good. You know, a farmer needs to have a reasonable expectation of some kind of reasonable weather to feel secure. And we're getting into kind of insecure times. Anyway, I have used up less time for this show than I should have, but we're at the end of the show anyway. So I'm going to suggest it. My hope is that everybody has a sufficiently marvelous week. And that is where we stand. I am at this very moment waving goodbye to all of the people watching. I hope that you will come back next week, and hopefully Tom and I will be able to be in the studio so you can actually see our faces. Feel a little bit unsure about that because of the Omicron virus that's been running around, and it looks like there's going to be a lot of people getting that. The fortunate thing about that is that there is some kind of expectation that not everybody will get terribly sick. Nevertheless, it is something that we have some kind of, we can hope that this will be over. The pandemic will be over at some point in the not too distant future. So, that having been said, I hope you have a lovely week, a sufficiently marvelous week, and that you can all come back in